You are dismissed, effective immediately. Hand in your ID card before you leave this building." The words landed in the middle of the corridor, loud enough for every nurse, every orderly, every patient's relative sitting on the plastic chairs along the wall to hear them. Ngozi did not move. She stood with her hands at her sides, still wearing her pale blue uniform, still holding the empty tray she had just collected from room 14. 17 people were watching, some of them she had worked beside for 2 years. Not one of them said a word. All she had done was stay. She had stayed with an old woman, a stranger, who had been left alone on a corridor bench for 7 hours without food, without water, without a single person checking whether she was alive or dying. It had taken Ngozi her lunch money, her transport money, and 4 hours past the end of her shift. 4 hours and her last 20 setas, and now she had nothing. What Abina, who stood before her with folded arms and the expression of someone who had been waiting a long time for this moment, did not know was who that old woman was. None of them knew, but they would. The morning always started the same way at Korlibu Teaching Hospital. The corridors filled before 6. Relatives arrived with food wrapped in foil, with children who did not understand why they had to whisper, with a particular kind of exhaustion that came from sleeping in a plastic chair for 3 nights in a row. The nurses moved through them like water moving around stones, fast, practiced, eyes scanning for the things that mattered and passing over the things that didn't. Ngozi had been doing this for 2 years and 4 months. She knew the corridors the way she knew the walk from her front door to the bus stop. Without looking, without thinking, her feet finding their way while her mind stayed somewhere else. That morning, her mind was on the letter. It had come 4 days ago. She had read it so many times the paper had gone soft at the folds. "Dear Kofi Menza Asante, we regret to inform you that your scholarship application for the 2nd year has not been approved due to insufficient academic funding. The amount outstanding for the upcoming semester is GH4200. Payment must be received by the 30th of this month, or your enrollment will be suspended." The 30th was 11 days away. Kofi was 20 years old. He was studying engineering at the University of Ghana, and he was the first person in their family to go beyond secondary school. When their father died 6 years ago, quietly in this very hospital in a room on the 2nd floor that Ngozi still could not walk past without slowing down, Kofi had been 14 and already talking about bridges, about how he wanted to build things that lasted. Their mother had wept and said, "Then build them." She died 2 years later, and Ngozi had said the same thing at the funeral. "Build them, Kofi. I will handle the rest." She had been handling the rest ever since. She earned 940 setas a month. After rent, after food, after the small amount she sent Kofi for transport and textbooks, there was very little left. There was certainly not 4,200 setas. There was not even 400. She had applied to 3 microfinance institutions in the past 2 weeks. 2 had not responded. 1 had called to say she did not meet the collateral requirements. "You look like someone sat on your face," said Kemi, appearing beside her with 2 cups of tea from the corridor vendor. Kemi was a ward cleaner 3 years older than Ngozi, with a laugh that started deep in her chest and could be heard from 2 rooms away. She had been Ngozi's closest friend since Ngozi's first week, when Kemi had found her crying in the supply room and had handed her a biscuit without asking any questions. "I'm fine," Ngozi said. "You've been fine for a week and it keeps getting worse." Kemi pressed one of the cups into her hand. "Kofi's school money?" Ngozi nodded. Kemi was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My grandmother used to say, 'The hand that gives never goes empty for long.' I know that doesn't pay a bill, but I believe it." Ngozi smiled, a small tired thing. "I believe it too," she said. "I just don't know when." She did not see Abina watching them from the nurse's station at the end of the hall. Abina, who had applied for the ward supervisor position 3 months ago and had not gotten it. Abina, who had believed, and told several people, that the reason she had not gotten it was because the panel liked Ngozi better. Abina, who had been waiting, with the patience of someone who knew how to wait for an opportunity. She did not see any of this. She picked up her tray and went back to work. It was just after noon when Ngozi first noticed her. She was sitting on the long wooden bench at the far end of the ground floor corridor, the one near the administrative offices, away from the main wards, where people sometimes waited for paperwork that never seemed to come. The woman was old. 70, perhaps more. She wore a simple dark dress that had been washed too many times and a pair of flat shoes that were slightly too large for her feet. On her lap she held a small handbag, both hands folded over it, as if she were protecting it from something. She had been there when Ngozi started her shift at 6 in the morning. She was still there now. Ngozi stopped. She looked at the woman more carefully. The woman's head was slightly bowed. Her lips were dry, badly dry, the kind of dry that came from not drinking anything for many hours. There was a faint tremor in her left hand. Ngozi looked around the corridor. 2 orderlies passed without turning their heads. A family group, a man, a woman, 2 teenage children. walked by in a tight cluster, too caught up in their own worry to notice anyone else. A nurse Ngozi, recognized from the second ward, walked past, glanced at the old woman, and kept walking. Ngozi stood there for a moment. She thought about the tray she needed to return. She thought about the medication rounds she was already slightly behind on. She thought about the 25 cetus in her pocket, 20 for the food she hadn't eaten yet, and 5 for the trotro home. That was all she had until Friday. She walked it over to the bench and crouched down to eye level. "Auntie," she said softly. "Auntie, are you all right?" The old woman opened her eyes slowly. They were dark brown and very clear, the kind of eyes that noticed everything and gave nothing away. "I am sitting," the woman said. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Not confused, not frightened, just tired. Have you eaten today?" A pause. "My son said he would come back with food." She looked toward the entrance door. "He has not come back." Ngozi looked at the entrance door too. It was 4 hours since visiting hours began. "How long have you been waiting, Auntie?" "Since this morning," the woman said simply. "Early." Ngozi was quiet for a moment. Then she straightened up. "I'll be back," she said. She went to the corridor vendor, the woman with the small table near the side exit who sold tea, bread, and rice in styrofoam containers. She bought a portion of rice and stew, a bottle of water, and a small sachet of oral rehydration salts. It cost her 18 setas. She now had 7 left. She would have to walk home. She brought everything back to the bench and set it down beside the old woman. "You don't have to do this," the woman said, looking at the food. "I know," Ngozi said. She opened the water first and handed it to her. "Please drink first." Slowly, she sat down on the bench beside her and helped her open the container. For a while, neither of them spoke. The old woman ate with the careful, deliberate movements of someone who was very hungry but too proud to show it. Then she asked, "Why are you helping me?" Ngozi thought about it. She could have said many things. She could have said it was her job, which was not quite true. This was outside her ward. She could have said she felt sorry for her, but that wasn't quite right either. The woman didn't look like someone who needed pity. She looked like someone who had been failed by people who should have known better. "Because you were here and you needed someone," Ngozi said. "And I was the one who saw you." The woman looked at her for a long moment. Something moved behind those careful eyes. "What is your name?" "Ngozi." "I am Mama Ama," the woman said. "It is a good thing you did, Ngozi. A good thing." Ngozi stayed until the food was finished. Then she stayed a little longer because Mame Ama's son still had not come. She flagged down a doctor she knew from the second floor and asked him to check her blood pressure, which was low but not dangerous. She found a pillow from a supply closet and put it behind the woman's back. She refilled the water bottle from the cooler near the nurse's station. By the time she left the bench, it was 4 hours past the end of her shift. She had 7 cetas in her pocket and an hour and a half walk home. She did not mind. Or rather, she minded, but it did not change anything. The woman had been there, and Ngozi had seen her. That was the whole equation. What she did not notice as she finally walked back toward the nurse's station to collect her bag was that Mame Ama watched her go, watched her all the way down the corridor, and then reached into her small handbag and took out her phone. Abena had been watching since the rice. She had seen Ngozi crouch down at the bench, had seen her walk to the vendor, come back with food, sit down, had watched the clock, an hour too. She had done the arithmetic quickly and cleanly, the way she did most things. Ngozi had spent most of her afternoon shift sitting with a vagrant on a bench instead of completing her rounds. 3 patients in Ward C had waited longer than standard protocol for their afternoon medication check. It was not a crisis another nurse had covered eventually, but it was a deviation, a recordable deviation. Abena had been waiting for a recordable deviation for 3 months. She made 2 notes on her phone and said nothing until the next morning when she walked into the ward supervisor's office at 7:15 a.m. with those notes printed on a single sheet of paper. The ward supervisor was Sister Deed, a careful woman who had been running this ward for 11 years and who did not like disruption of any kind. Abena had chosen her audience well. By 7:45, Ngozi had been called in. By 7:50, it was over. Ngozi stood in the corridor holding her ID card. Sister Deed had said the words quickly and without looking at her. "Protocol deviation, unattended patients. We cannot accommodate this kind of negligence." The language was formal and hollow, and none of it said what was actually happening, which was that Abena had wanted this for a long time and had finally found her opening. Ngozi knew this. She had known it the moment she walked in and saw Abena standing to the side with her hands folded, watching with the focused stillness of someone watching something they had planned. She wanted to say something. She had rehearsed things on the walk-in, quiet, reasonable things about what she had actually done and why, about the old woman who had been abandoned for 7 hours, about the fact that her patients had received their medication just slightly later than usual. She had rehearsed these things carefully, but when she opened her mouth, Sister Deed was already looking at her phone and Abena was already looking at the wall, and the words dissolved somewhere in her chest before they reached her tongue. She handed over the ID card. She said, "I understand." She walked out. Kemi was in the corridor. She had heard word in this hospital moved faster than the ventilation system. She stepped forward immediately, and Ngozi shook her head once. "Not here," Ngozi said quietly. They walked to the car park. Kemi put her hand on Ngozi's arm, and Ngozi stood very still and breathed through it. The anger was there. It was large and hot and completely useless, and she had enough experience with useless feelings to know that giving them room only made things worse. "She planned this," Kemi said. The word she used next was not a polite one. "I know," Ngozi said. "We can appeal. We can go to the Kemi." Ngozi looked at her. "I know. But right now I need to think about Kofi. The letter. 10 days. Kemi went very quiet. She understood. There were two problems, and one of them, the injustice of what had happened, was important. The other one was urgent, and urgency always wins. "What will you do?" Kemi asked. "Find another job." Ngozi said, "Keep looking for the money. What else is there to do?" She walked home. It took an hour and 20 minutes. She did not cry, which surprised her a little. She thought about Mame Ama on the bench, about the way the woman had held her handbag with both hands, about the quiet way she had said, "I am sitting." As if sitting was itself an act of will. She thought, "I would do it again." She thought, "I just don't know what I'll do about Kofi." She thought both things at the same time and did not know what to do with either of them. 7 days passed. Ngozi applied for 4 positions, 2 clinics, 1 private hospital, 1 community health center. The private hospital called for an interview on day 3. It went well, she thought. They said they would be in touch. They did not call back. The clinic nearest her house had a notice in the window saying they were hiring. She went in on day 4 and spoke to a woman at the front desk who took her CV with the pleasant efficiency of someone who had taken many CVs and had no intention of reading any of them. On day 5, she received a message from Kofi. "Ngozi, the university bursar, called me. They say I have 6 days. I don't want to bother you, but I thought you should know." She stared at the message for a long time. She typed back, "I know, I'm handling it. Focus on your studies." She did not know if this was a lie. She sent it anyway. On the evening of day 5, her neighbor Mr. Asiedu, an old man who lived alone since his wife passed and whose arthritis had gotten bad enough that the stairs were becoming difficult, knocked on her door. He had forgotten to eat again. She could see it in his face, the particular vagueness that came over him when his blood sugar dropped. She heated rice from the small pot she had made for herself and gave him half of it and sat with him while he ate and listened to him talk about his late wife, who had apparently made the best Contamire stew in the whole of Accra and possibly the world. By the time he went back upstairs, she was not hungry anymore, so she ate bread and drank tea and went to sleep. She did not think of this as anything. It was just the thing that needed doing. On day 6, Kemi called. "Any news?" "No, I asked Sister Deed to reconsider. She said the decision was final." "It's fine, Kemi." "It is not fine." A pause. "My grandmother's saying isn't working fast enough. I want to file a formal." "Kemi." Ngozi heard the exhaustion in her own voice and didn't try to hide it. "I appreciate you, I do. But I can't fight 2 battles at once. The school money first, everything else after." On the morning of day 7, she was sitting at her small kitchen table with the letter from the university and a calculator, running numbers that did not add up no matter how she arranged them, when her phone rang. It was a number she did not recognize, an Accra code. "Is this Ngozi?" A man's voice, professional, careful. "Yes. My name is Mr. Frimpong. I am calling from Mensa Group. We would like to speak with you at your earliest convenience. Would you be available tomorrow morning?" Ngozi looked at the letter. She looked at the calculator. "Mensa Group," she repeated. "I'm sorry, I think there may be a mistake. I haven't applied to Mensa Group." A brief pause. "There is no mistake," Mr. Frimpong said. "We were asked to contact you specifically. I can explain more when we meet. Would 9 o'clock work?" She said yes. She didn't know why. She wrote down the address and ended the call and sat for a while with the phone in her hand. She called Kemi. "Kemi, do you know anything about a company called Mensa Group?" There was a long silence on the other end. Then Kemi said in a voice that was doing its best to stay calm, "Ngozi, Mensa Group is Edmund Menza's company. Edmund Menza, the man who built half the new commercial district in Accra, the one who was on the cover of Business Ghana last month. That Mensa Group." Ngozi looked at the address she had written down. A building in Airport City. "Why would they be calling me?" she said. "I don't know," Kemi said, "but Ngozi, go." The Mensa Group building was made of glass and steel and the kind of quiet that expensive buildings have, not silence exactly, but a careful management of sound, as if the air itself had been briefed on how to behave. Ngozi wore her best blouse, dark green, ironed the night before, and the shoes she saved for important occasions. She gave her name at the reception desk. She was offered water, which she accepted. She sat in a chair that cost more than her monthly rent and tried to breathe normally. Mr. Frimpong came to collect her himself, a small, precise man in his 50s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He shook her hand formally and led her to a conference room on the 4th floor with a view over the city. There was tea on the table, a folder, 2 chairs. He sat across from her and folded his hands and said, "Mrs. Ngozi, I'll come directly to the point. We were asked to contact you by Mame Ama Mensa." Ngozi was very still. "She is the mother of Edmund Mensa, our founder and chairman," Mr. Frimpong continued. "8 days ago, she had a medical episode at Korlebu Teaching Hospital while waiting for her son, who was delayed in traffic. She was alone for approximately 7 hours. During that time, you were the only staff member who stopped to help her." Ngozi said nothing. She was doing a calculation in her head. "Mama Ama Mensa. Mama Ama Mensa. Mrs. Mensa instructed us to find you," Mr. Frimpong said. "That proved straightforward enough. You had given her your name. She remembered it exactly." He opened the folder. "Before I tell you what we'd like to offer, I want you to know that something was done on your brother's behalf 3 days ago. The outstanding balance on his university fees, 4,200 citas, has been paid in full. Additionally, a scholarship has been established in Mrs. Mensa's name at the university to cover his remaining 2 years." The room was very quiet. Ngozi looked at the folder. She looked at Mr. Frimpong's folded hands. She looked at the view of Accra through the window, the city going about its morning without any awareness that something had just shifted in her life. "I don't understand," she said. Her voice was smaller than she expected. "Mrs. Mensa's instructions were specific," Mr. Frimpong said. "She said, and I am quoting, 'The girl bought me food with money she didn't have and stayed with me when she had no reason to. She didn't know who I was. She didn't ask anything. I want her brother to finish his studies.'" Ngozi pressed her lips together. She had not cried when she lost her job. She had not cried during the 7 days of waiting and applying and calculating numbers that refused to cooperate. She had told herself there would be time for that later, when things were resolved, when there was a little more space for feelings that didn't have anywhere useful to go. She cried now. It was not elegant. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth and looked at the ceiling and breathed, and it happened anyway. Mr. Frimpong waited. He did not look uncomfortable. He looked like a man who had been in this room before for different reasons and had learned that some moments were simply meant to pass at their own speed. When she could speak again, she said, "I would like to write her a letter." "She expected you would," he said. "She asked me to give you her address personally." He slid a small card across the table. "She also asked me to tell you one more thing," she said. "Tell her I saw her give her food money to the boy who sells water at the gate on her way out. Tell her I was watching from the window." Ngozi remembered the boy, 12 years old maybe, standing in the heat with his tray of sachets. She had had 7 citas left. She had given him 5 and kept 2 for the phone credit she needed. She had not thought about it for a single moment afterward. She stared at the card. "Miss Ngozi," Mr. Frimpong said, "we would also like to offer you a position here, coordinator of our new corporate wellness and employee health program. The salary is..." He named a figure that was nearly 4 times what she had been earning at Korlebu. "Mrs. Mensa felt that someone with your instincts for care should be working somewhere that recognizes them. You are of course under no obligation, but the offer is genuine, and it is open." She looked at him. "I'll need a day to think," she said. "Of course," he said. "Take 2. She took 1. The news reached Korlebu on a Thursday. It did not come from Ngozi. She had not spoken to anyone at the hospital since the day she handed in her ID card. It came from a journalist who was writing a profile on Edmund Mensa for a business magazine and had included as a small human interest detail near the end the story of how his elderly mother had been left unattended at a public hospital and how a junior nurse aide had been the only person to help her and how that nurse aide had subsequently been dismissed. The article did not name names. It did not need to. Within 24 hours, everyone at Korlebu knew. Sister Deed read it on her phone during her lunch break. She read it twice. Then she put her phone face down on her desk and sat very still for a long time. Abina heard about it from her cousin, who had read it on a news aggregator site. She called in sick the next morning. She called in sick again the day after that. On the 3rd day, a letter arrived at the hospital from the Mensa Group's legal team. Polite, formal, and precise. It noted that Mensa Group had previously been in discussions with Korlebu regarding a charitable funding partnership for the hospital's underfunded pediatric ward. It noted that following recent events, those discussions were being placed on hold pending a review of the hospital's internal staff management practices. Sister Deed requested an urgent meeting with hospital administration. Abina was called into HR the following week. The conversation that took place in that room was not made public, but Abina was seen carrying a box to her car on a Friday afternoon, and her name was removed from the staff directory by the following Monday. Ngozi heard about all of this from Kemi, who texted a detailed account in a series of 17 messages, each slightly more dramatic than the last, ending with, "I told you." The hand that gives never goes. Ngozi read all 17 messages on her lunch break. She was eating at a proper table, in a proper canteen, with food she had not had to budget for. She looked out the window at the across skyline and felt something settle in her chest. Not triumph exactly. Not satisfaction, something quieter than either of those things. the sense of a circle closing, of the world doing something it should have done earlier, but had finally managed. She wrote a letter to Mame Ama that evening. She wrote about Kofi, and about their father, and about the bridges. She wrote about the morning she had seen her on the bench and had not been able to walk past. She did not write, "Thank you." The words felt too small and slightly wrong, as if what had happened between them could be settled with gratitude. She wrote instead, "I hope your son apologized properly. You deserved better from him that day. You deserve better from everyone." She folded the letter and put it in an envelope and put the small card from Mr. Frimpong on top of it. Then she made tea and called her brother. "Kofi," she said when he picked up, "I have news." There was a pause. She could hear the background noise of the dormitory, voices, a door, someone's music. "Good news or bad news," he said carefully. "Build your bridges," she said. "You have time now. Build them well." There was a silence that lasted just long enough for her to know he understood. Then he made a sound that was not quite crying and not quite laughing and was somehow both at once, and she held the phone and listened to it and thought, This is what it was for. There is a saying, old and simple, that has moved through markets and kitchens and hospital corridors for longer than anyone can remember. The axe forgets, but the tree remembers what Ngozi did on that ordinary afternoon, buying rice with her last 20 CDs, sitting on a hard bench for 4 hours past the end of her shift, walking home without complaint. She had forgotten before she reached her front door. But the tree remembered, and the forest remembered for her.